It's time for another Friday mailbag, and today we're diving into the quarterback competition, breakout freshmen, movement on the defensive line, a recruiting class that's already making some waves, and a whole lot more on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018. Now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and today is Friday, April 11th. So happy Friday to you, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. I got a couple quick programming notes before we get started here. If you missed yesterday's episode because I released it later in the day than normal, go check that out. I posted a live reaction to the commitment of five-star defensive end Rodney Dunham to Notre Dame. He made his official announcement a little after 4 p.m. Eastern, and then I posted my live reaction to the whole thing. This was the biggest commitment to Notre Dame in a long, long time. So you're not going to want to miss that episode. Also, with the Blue Gold game coming up tomorrow, I'm going to post my reaction to that game over the weekend. We're not going to talk about it a ton on the show today, to be honest with you, because there's just not going to be a whole lot of starters. There's certainly some interesting things to look out for, especially with the quarterbacks and things like that. But with so many injuries, it's just going to be like offense and defense going up against each other. Marcus Freeman said they're going to figure out a way to make it competitive. But I'm still going to have some takeaways for sure. So make sure you tune into that episode over the weekend. But as for today, it is the first Friday mailbag in over a month. So it feels good to be back. I got a bunch of great questions like I always do. So I appreciate everyone who submitted theirs. We're covering everything from the quarterback battle, which we basically do every show, and we're going to continue doing until they announce a starter. We're also going to talk about changes to the defense under Chris Ash, all the momentum that this recruiting class has all of a sudden, and a whole lot more. So let's just get right into it. Our first question here comes from @QB_Sammy_5, who asked a question about the quarterbacks. He asked, if you had to place a bet on one of the three options involving Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchey, and CJ Carr, what would you pick? Number one, all three quarterbacks return after the spring. Number two quarterbacks return after the spring and one transfers. Option number three, one quarterback returns and two transfer. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'd honestly bet on all three coming back. And that is certainly not something I expected to say before the start of spring practice. My thinking at the time was that two guys would kind of solidify themselves over a third. I thought it might be Steve Angeli and CJ Carr. I thought it'd be a tight race, but I thought that coming out of spring, those would be the clear 1-2 in either combination, and then someone would have to come in third. But at this point, all signs kind of indicate that it's still being a three-man race, and every single quarterback absolutely has a chance to win the job. I just don't think any one quarterback has separated himself at this point. So if every single one of these guys has a legitimate chance to be the starting quarterback come the fall, then I expect all three to return, right? Like, if you're Steve Angeli, you've waited 3 years to have this opportunity to be the starting quarterback. And after spring practice, it's still a competition. You might not have locked it up in the way that you wanted to, but you still have a good chance to come back and be the starter. You're just going to come back and be the starter. There really aren't that many great options for Steve Angeli anyway at this point. If his biggest concern is playing time, and he wants to play for a Power 4 school, like, it's pretty hard to do to transfer to another program after spring, learn a whole new system and a brand new team all over the course of a summer, and then get ready to go to be the starter week one. Like, that's a pretty difficult task. Not impossible, and maybe a situation opens up for him, but I would be surprised. And if you're Kenny Minchey, you've waited 2 years, you've got a great chance to be the starting quarterback, you're firmly in the mix. I would be shocked if he left, if that was the case either. And then CJ Carr, you've only been around 1 year. Right? And even if Steve Angeli or Kenny Minchey win the job, then you could eventually win it later on. So I would be surprised if he left. So I'm leaning towards all three coming back. Really, the only way that option number three could happen is if CJ Carr won the job so definitively that he was already above Steve Angeli and Kenny Minchey. In that case, maybe both of those guys would transfer. But I don't think option three is really an option at this point, because I don't think CJ Carr has won the job to that degree. So I think it's either option one or two, and right now I'm leaning towards all three coming back, which would be great for Notre Dame, but would also create new problems, which leads me to my next question, which comes from The Real Tanner, With the quarterback competition seemingly in gridlock, what is your ideal scenario for when they announce the starting quarterback? I think like the hard deadline is after the first 2 weeks of fall camp. So let's say they start fall camp at the end of July like they did last year. You have those first 2 weeks, and that's when you're seeing a lot of team. You're seeing a lot of good on good in practice. I think at that point, if you don't know who the starter is, you're probably going to be in some trouble because after those 2 weeks of camp, you turn the page from just trying to figure out who the team is and get everything kind of coming together to actually starting preparation to play Miami in the season opener. The fact that Notre Dame has to play Miami and then Texas A&M at home in the home opener just a couple weeks later, like that changes the complexity of this entire thing. I've talked about it before and how they're going to have to go about deciding on who's going to be the quarterback because like if they're playing a chump team in the first game and one of these younger guys, if it's like really close and you want to give one of these younger guys a shot, like at least you can kind of ease them into it. There is no easing anyone into it when you have to go on the road to face Miami in the season opener. So I think after those first 2 weeks of camp, you have to pick a guy. And at that point, I'm sure that one guy had probably solidified the job. Or if it's down to two, you probably have a better way of figuring it out. But I think at that point, if you keep dragging that competition any longer and you're splitting reps with the ones, you're just missing out on valuable reps, especially as you get closer and closer to the start of the season. So I never expected them to name a starter after spring practice. Certainly don't expect that to happen now. But they're going to continue to evaluate these guys throughout the summer during workouts and the non-mandatory workouts and the stuff that they do throughout the summer to stay in shape and get ready for the upcoming season. Like, this is going to be an ongoing process, and I think that they're going to finally announce it after the first 2 weeks of camp. Next question from @J_Patterson3. Which true freshman, one on offense and one on defense, will have the biggest impact this season? And his second question is, do you think it's possible that Aeneas Williams passes Jadarian Price as RB2? Let's get to the question about the freshmen first. On offense, I think it's going to be James Flanagan, the tight end. I don't think James Flanagan is going to be much of a threat in the passing game, but I could absolutely see him coming in when Notre Dame goes to 12 personnel with two tight ends there on the field. He's a really good blocker, and I think that's going to translate to the collegiate level pretty easily. He still has some work to do catching passes, but Notre Dame just has depth issues at the position. Like, Eli Raridon could have a breakout season this year, but you still need some depth behind him. They went out, they got Ty Washington out of Arkansas, who is also a really good blocker. So if those two guys stay healthy, they're going to be the 1 and 2, but it wouldn't surprise me if James Flanagan got some reps over Kevin Bauman, who's a 6-year senior who's dealt with a ton of injuries in his career, and Jack Larson, who is certainly bulked up, but he's still a little bit undersized as a tight end. And if you're just coming in for run packages, I would think that James Flanagan is a better blocker than Jack Larson. I love what Jack Larson can do as a pass catcher, and I think that he's going to develop into a good tight end. But if you're looking at what the team needs this year, I just think that tight end is a position of need, and James Flanagan can step in and make some plays right away. Like, think about Cooper Flanagan when he was a true freshman. No one really expected him to have a big impact, and he only had one catch for 19 yards, but he saw a lot of reps as a blocker, and I think we could see something similar with James Flanagan. Now, on defense, Manfremo probably has the best chance to crack the rotation immediately, so I'm going to take him. I think he's going to be the fifth linebacker behind Jalen Sneed, Drake Bowen, KVA, and Jane Osbury. So he'll be in the mix there. They rotated 5 guys last year. I think they're going to rotate 5 this year, just maybe not as evenly as they did last year. I think the first 4 guys are going to get more reps than Manfremo. And then safety, Jadon Blair, he might not have an impact at safety. I don't think they trust a true freshman back there to play safety in this defense, but he's definitely going to make an impact on special teams because he's so physically gifted, 6'5", super long, really fast. Like, he's probably going to make plays on punt block and things like that. So he's going to make an impact, but it would not surprise me at all if Dallas Golden is so impressive when he joins the team that he carves out a role for himself. It might be on punt return, kick return, maybe some gadget plays. I don't know, but I think he is just that good. And if you think about last year, no one would have expected that Leonard Moore would be the best freshman on the team because everyone figured that he was going to be riding the bench behind Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray. But he ends up beating out Jaden Mickey to be the backup corner. Morrison gets hurt. Leonard Moore steps in, and he has one of the best freshman seasons we have ever seen of a Notre Dame defensive player. So Manfremo is going to be my guess along with James Flanagan, but don't be surprised if it's a name that we aren't even considering at this point in time. And as for your second question, Jay Patterson 3, will Aeneas Williams surpass Jadarian Price as RB2? I just don't see it happening. I mean, it's possible, right? Anything is possible, but I would consider it unlikely because Jadarian Price is really, really good. And he gets overshadowed by the greatness of Jeremiah Love, which I understand, but Jadarian Price averaged 6.1 yards per carry last year and 121 touches. He had 27 missed tackles forced, and he had as many breakaway runs, which are runs of 15 yards or more, as Jeremiah Love on fewer touches. Does he need to figure out his happy feet? Does he need to hit the hole harder more often? Yes, he can't get stuffed at the line of scrimmage as often as he does, but still, he's a really, really good running back, and there are probably 100 programs out there that would love to have Jadarian Price and he be their lead running back. But Notre Dame's room is so deep and it's so talented, we're wondering if he can even be number 2, and that's a really good problem to have for Coach Jaywan Sider and the Notre Dame offense. All right, now that we've talked about the quarterback competitions and potential breakout freshmen, let's dive into the defensive side of the ball. Chris Ash, the changes he's going to make, the defensive line, and even some recruiting. That's all coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to our TurboTax expert who is matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed. All while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Our next question comes from Coach Zach54, who wants to know, with Chris Ash taking over as the defensive coordinator, how do you think the defense will adjust schematically? I don't think we're going to see a ton of change, at least in year one, right? Because it's Chris Ash's first season with this program, and he's also working with a defensive line coach that's already been there for a few years, a linebackers coach who's been there for a few years, and a defensive backs coach who's also been there for a few years. So when you're the new guy, and you're coming into a new system that's already proven to be really successful, you're not going to want to come in and change everything up. You're also working for a defensive-minded head coach and Marcus Freeman, who clearly has an idea of what he wants the defense to look like. He wants to run a 4-3 scheme that's very aggressive. They want to run man, but he is going to leave it up to his defensive coordinator to then maximize the players that he has and build out the scheme that he wants to do. But I got to give credit to Chris Ash because ever since he took over as the DC, like every single time that he has spoken to the media, he just says that he's going to keep things, as close to the same with Al Golden. They're just looking to enhance. He's not trying to reinvent the wheel here, which is exactly what he should say. But eventually, as he grows in his role and as he becomes more comfortable at Notre Dame, I do think that you're going to see bigger changes down the road, right? But that's probably 2 or 3 years from now if he's still around as the Notre Dame defensive coordinator. I think that in this first year, you're going to see a lot of the same stuff that Al Golden liked to do. But if you're looking for a couple differences, I think, they're going to run a little bit more zone coverage, although maybe not as much as people are making it out to be. I know that's become like a trendy topic to talk about during spring practice, and I get it. Like, Notre Dame ran a ton of man defense last year, certainly more than anyone else in the country other than Purdue, which is hilarious. But anyway, they didn't run zone that much, but they still did run zone. They ran it sometimes, just not that frequently. I think they're going to run it more under Chris Ash. But when you have corners like Leonard Moore and Christian Gray, and you can actually run man defense, you should do that because it opens up a ton of other opportunities on defense to blitz guys and just disguise different things to throw off the opposing quarterback. So I still think they're going to run man, but they're going to mix in zone a little bit more than we have been used to these past 3 years. They're going to blitz, but I don't think they're going to blitz quite as much as they did under Al Golden because Al Golden was extremely aggressive, and Chris Ash is aggressive as well. But maybe this has to do with the fact that they feel pretty confident in the defensive line, which I'm going to talk about here in just a moment. They might not feel the necessity to blitz as often as they did under Al Golden. So those are a couple things. But one thing that I'm really interested to see and this is like less of a scheme thing and maybe more of a philosophy difference between Al Golden and Chris Ash. Al Golden was very content to give up yards on the ground to eliminate explosive pass plays. Like, there were so many games where Notre Dame would be playing a lesser opponent and they'd actually get stuff going on the ground. And you're thinking, like, how is this team gaining yards on this Notre Dame defense when they are far more talented than them? Like, it happened against, I'm trying to think, was it Miami? No, it wasn't Miami, Ohio. There was a game last season, I'm drawing a blank here, where Notre Dame was going up against statistically one of the worst rushing offenses in the entire country. And then in that first half, they ended up getting a bunch of yards. I can't believe I can't remember the opponent right now, but it's later in the week. Cut me some slack here. But then obviously in the second half, Notre Dame tightened it up, made some adjustments. They eliminated that. But I wonder if Chris Ash is going to place more of an emphasis on stopping the run early, because maybe that leaves them a little bit more susceptible to giving up big plays in the passing game. Notre Dame did not really give up big plays in the passing game until they played Ohio State in the national championship. So that's going to be one thing that I'm going to be looking at early, because Al Golden ran a true bend but don't break defense, and they rarely ever broke, so it worked out really effectively, because once teams would get in the red zone, they would shut it down. But that's one thing that I'm going to be looking out for to see with Chris Ash compared to Al Golden. Next question. At Will Find a Way, you are much higher on the defensive line now than you were at the start of the offseason. Do you think the current group can be dominant in 2025? Dominant against bad teams, potentially. I don't think they're going to develop into like a true dominant force until later in the year, once Boubacar Traore's been back and Jordan Botelho is back. Once they look healthy, they got their legs back underneath them, knock the rust off, all that. Then maybe later on in the season they can develop into a dominant force. But I don't think they're going to come out against Miami and just dominate and get in the backfield with four guys every single play. I just think that's a stretch for this group. But I feel good about them, right? Like, I love what they have on the edge. I think Bryce Young is really going to take a huge leap this year. Josh Burnham, extremely underrated. And then you've got at Viper, Junior Tuihalamaka. Even though he's third string, like, they might need him a little bit more early on, because I know that Traore and Botelho, they've been killing it in their rehab, and all the reports on them have been great. Like, I'm kind of in I'll believe it when I see it mode with them. Not to say that they won't play in that game, but, Mitchell Evans was playing early on this season, coming off his torn ACL from the season before, but he didn't really look like Mitchell Evans until later in the year. So when are we going to see Boubacar Traore look like that dominant pass rusher that we saw glimpses of at the beginning of last year? I don't know when that's going to be, potentially later on in the season. So I think this group will develop. They will get a lot better, but are they going to come out and just be dominating teams from the jump? Probably not. So we're going to have to be a little patient with this group, but I do think they're going to get there. And then hopefully by the time that Notre Dame is fighting for a playoff spot there at the end of the season, I think this group is really going to come into their own and be a force on that defense. All right, Big Mike, 88. Now that Notre Dame picked up commitments from top defensive end prospects, Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Iwatade, does this class have the potential to finish in the top 5? It's hard to say right now because Notre Dame only has 9 commits in this class, but they are ranked 7th in the 24/7 Sports composite rankings after Dunham's commitment, which is obviously a big deal. But to get in that top 5, they have to land pretty much all the top guys that they're after. And even though they've got some momentum right now, it's hard for me to believe they're going to land every single one of their top targets because things changed. And I don't think they're in the mix for enough top 50 guys to make that kind of jump later on, but they still are in the mix for a ton of top targets. Let's go through it. What's the best case scenario for Notre Dame that could catapult them into the top 5? So let's say all the guys who are currently committed stay committed. That's obviously very important to this. And then they get Javian Osborne and Brian Bonner at running back. Those 2 guys are elite top 150 prospects. That would be great. Sorry about the sirens in the background, if you can hear that. Wide receiver, Caden Finley, Braden Robinson, Bubba Frazier to go along with Dylan Faison, who's already committed. That would be a good receiver group. But Braden Robinson is being pursued by Ohio State. Caden Finley has some suitors as well from Texas and other schools in his area. So that's going to be tough. I really like Notre Dame and their chances with four-star tight end Ian Premier. Like, he's a stud, but they're going to have to fight really hard to get him to leave his home state of Kansas. On the offensive line, if they can get Ekene Ogboko and or Gregory Patrick, that'd be really good. On the D-line, they have a lot of momentum, but they still need to get like Mikhail Blade, Elijah Golden, Xavier Griffin-Haynes, Tiki Ola. Maybe they can flip Samote Koatanga from USC as well. At linebacker, they would need to get Jacoby Clapper and Tank King. At corner, they would really have a shot at getting in the top 5 if they landed all these guys, plus Kari Adams, because he is a stud. He's like a top 30 player in the country. And if they got him to go along with Jordan Thomas and Chasten Smith, the guy they already got committed, that'd be huge. Safety, Nick Reddish and Joey O'Brien. Like, I'm naming all the top targets that they have on their board that have not yet committed. And if they are somehow able to get every single one of these guys, maybe. Like, that's really what it takes to get in the top 5. And, I mean, I love the momentum that Notre Dame has in the recruiting trail, but those are a lot of guys. Those are a lot of really talented players, and Notre Dame would basically have to land all of them to get in the top 5. So I would say probably not top 5, but I do think that this class will end up in the top 10. All right, we got a quick one here from @JakeM_23. It seems like Cam Williams is already being passed up by true freshman Elijah Burris. Is it time to give up on the former 5-star? No, it's definitely not time to give up on Cam Williams as a football player. Like, he's only been around one full season, and he's going through spring practice. He's getting a lot of reps out there because it seems like every other Notre Dame wide receiver is hurt. But I think you just have to change your expectations for Cam Williams. He's obviously not going to pan out like Ryan Williams at Alabama, who was a young, freaky, athletic wide receiver who dominated from the jump. You know, when you looked at Cam Williams' athleticism and his raw traits, you're like, wow, like that dude's a freak athlete. Once he kind of figures out the wide receiver position, he can be really good. Well, it's taken him a little bit longer to figure out how to play the wide receiver position in college than a lot of us would have hoped. He's got to get better at the details. He's got to catch the ball, for one. He's got to get better at route running. He's got to get better understanding leverage and knowing where to go on every play. Can't be making those mental mistakes. But I do think that he can still turn out to be a good wide receiver. Like, it doesn't happen in the same way for all of these guys. So I think that it's taken him some time, but he seems like a person who loves Notre Dame, wants to stay around at the school. So if he's willing to wait, he's willing to work hard and develop, I think that he could really blossom later on in his career and certainly be a big-time contributor for Notre Dame. But definitely do not give up on him at this point in time. All right, we got a few more questions left, and then we're going to wrap things up with Notre Dame men's basketball pursuit of transfers or lack thereof in a dream postseason matchup that would send shockwaves across college football. It's coming up next. Next up, we got a question from @Matt Simoncini. Why isn't Micah Shrewsberry being active in the transfer portal? It seems like every other team has at least 2 commits right now, but I haven't even seen a player who's considering Notre Dame in the portal. Matt, I have no idea. It's inexcusable. Like, I'm going to save my freak out until the transfer portal window is officially closed. And look, I understand they paid a lot to retain Burton, and I'm sure that freshman class wasn't cheap, so they probably spent a bulk of their NIL budget already. But still, this team cannot go into next season without looking into the portal to get some help, because they were horrible last season, and then they lost their second leading scorer in Tay Davis. And I really have high expectations for Jalen Harrelson his freshman year, but like, is he going to come in and be ready to go right away and be a really good player? Like, look at Rutgers last year. They had 2 top 10 prospects. They had 2 lottery picks, and they didn't even finish 500. Like, you just can't win with freshmen anymore in college basketball. You need to get old and stay old, to quote Mike Bray. And this team, even though Burton's going to be entering his 3rd year, they're still very young, and they just don't really have any options. So I cannot survive another season of Keba Jai. They got to get a veteran big man. And I mean, no disrespect to Keba, but like, he's just not a guy who should be getting 30 minutes a game in the ACC. He'd be a good guy to come off the bench, bring some energy, but you just need to have better options if you're Notre Dame at this point. I had Tom Noy on, I believe it was a couple weeks ago, men's basketball insider. And at that point in time, they did not even have a visit scheduled for a single player in the transfer portal. And there are over 1,000 guys in the transfer portal. You're telling me you can't find a few that wouldn't fit perfectly well at Notre Dame? Like, there is so many good basketball players around the country playing at all kinds of levels. And the fact that Notre Dame doesn't even have some momentum with any single one of these guys, at least not in the public, is just absolutely inexcusable. And this is a huge year Huge year for Micah Shrewsberry. Like if they go, well below 500 in ACC play again, like that seat is going to get really hot. And I know that they signed him to a long-term deal and they're committed to a lot of money for Micah Shrewsberry. But frankly, Jack Swarbrick is the one who hired him. Pete Bavacqua at that time was like doing his internship or whatever you want to call it and following Jack around and kind of learning the ropes. And I think Pete Bavacqua and I think Jack Swarbrick was a great AD at Notre Dame. I think Pete Bavacqua might have to step in if it's another disappointing season after year 3 and be like, look, like we tried to give you what we could, but it might be time for a change. Now, I'm obviously rooting for that not to happen. I want Micah Shrewsberry to succeed. When he was hired, I was all in on the hire for a bunch of different reasons, but so far, it has been a major disappointment. We all had patience with year 1. Year 2, we're like, hey, don't expect this team to even make the tournament necessarily, but as long as they're a bubble team, as long as they show clear improvement and development in year 2, then I think people would be graceful and patient, and it got a lot worse. This team didn't try. They had no identity. So, yeah, man, it is not good. I understand why they can't get undergrad transfers in, or at least not at a high clip, but there's a lot of grad transfers out there as well, and Notre Dame should absolutely be able to get a few of them, and so far they have not been able to do so. Next question, MG Marino 36. If you could create a dream postseason matchup for Notre Dame football this year, what would it be? This is easy. Notre Dame at LSU at night, Tiger Stadium, first round of the playoff. Can you imagine that environment and how awesome that would be? And I think this is a legitimate possibility because this is a very big year for Brian Kelly at LSU. They really need to make the playoff. They were extremely aggressive in the transfer portal. They bring back Nuss Myers, one of the best quarterbacks in college football. So this would be awesome. Seeing Marcus Freeman go up against Brian Kelly in an elimination game in the college football playoff would be incredible theater. And it's always kind of thrown around like at the end of the season when you're looking at different matchups, you're like, oh, like if this happens and Notre Dame could face off against LSU. Well, it hasn't happened yet, obviously. But if these two teams squared off in the college football playoff, that would be insane. And personally, I've always wanted to see a game in Tiger Stadium. And if these two teams played each other in the college football playoff, I would move heaven and earth. I'd spend every last cent that I had to be in attendance for that game because, whatever you think about Brian Kelly, whatever you think about LSU, like, if you're just a fan of college football, Tiger Stadium is on every single person's like top 5 lists of best stadium experiences they have ever had, especially at night. And then that would amplify even more in a playoff atmosphere. So that's the dream, right? Like Notre Dame already made it to the national championship. I would have picked Ohio State Notre Dame national championship if I could dream up any postseason matchup, although I would prefer that Notre Dame win it if that ever happens again. Although I don't know if my heart can take another game like that again. Still, every time I see stuff from that game, it just brings me sadness. But I'd also love to see Notre Dame go up against Alabama in the Rose Bowl, like the real Rose Bowl, to make up for whatever happened in 2020 when they were playing at AT&T Stadium. Like, I've never been to a game at the Rose Bowl. I've been by it a bunch of times living out here in LA. But I think that would be like just everything you love about college football, like two storied programs, the tradition, going at it in the most iconic venue in all of college football, in the college football playoff. Like those two matchups to me, those would be awesome. And I think that either one of those things could absolutely happen next year. Last one, Matthew Dow. Really enjoyed the interview with Matthias Farley. Thank you, Matthew. If you could have any Notre Dame player, past or present, as a guest on the podcast, who would it be and why? So I've thought about this before, obviously. Brady Quinn is an obvious one. He's my favorite player as a child. I think a lot of people who are my age just worshipped Brady Quinn when they were kids because, when I was much younger, Notre Dame was just terrible at football during the Bob Davie days, and then they had the one good season with Tyron Willingham, but their offense was horrific. And then, Charlie Weiss comes in 2005, 2006. Like, those two teams were unbelievable. At least it felt like it at the time because all I had experienced as a Notre Dame fan was pain. But if you look back, they really weren't even all that great. Like, they just scored a bunch of points. They were exciting on offense, and then they had Tom Zbikowski on defense, who's making all kinds of plays. So I've had the privilege of meeting Brady a few times. We run into each other through different things with Fox. But I would love to have him on and talk about a bunch of stuff for like an hour because we could obviously relive all the stuff from his playing days. But he's still so involved with the program and Rally, the NIL fund. He has a huge hand in that and help getting that together. And he's a national college football analyst as well. So I would love to talk to Brady Quinn for hour, maybe 2, right? So he would be number 1. He's like the white whale, golden goose, all of that stuff. Jeff Samardzija is another name from my childhood, but he just never does interviews, which is too bad because I think he has such an interesting story, obviously being a multi-sport athlete, picking baseball over football, even though he probably could have been a first-round pick in the NFL draft if he decided to go that route. Had a good career in the majors, made a ton of money. But yeah, he's kind of off the grid. And you know who else is off the grid that I would love to talk to? Everett Golson. What has he been up to, right? What an interesting career arc he had at Notre Dame. You know, starting as a redshirt freshman, taking the team to the national championship, although he needed some help from Tommy Rees several times along the way. And then he gets suspended for the 2013 season after that, misses the entire year, then comes back in 2014. And it looks like at the beginning of the season, they have a chance to be something really, really special. Then they lose to Florida State and the wheels fall off after that. And then 2015, he's not even on the team anymore. So there's just such a chaotic career path for Everett Golson. And I got to give him credit. He's like off the grid. I've tried to look him up, find out what he's doing, see if I could contact him to see if he'd come on the podcast. Can't find anything. So good on Everett Golson, man, because I'm sure he didn't love being in the spotlight when he's a player. Now he just kind of exists in his life outside of football. But I would love to get a chance to catch up with Everett Golson. A couple other guys. Manti Te'o, obvious reasons. He's also in the media now, so I think he'd be a great interview. He does stuff for Good Morning Football. Yeah, incredible story, great redemption arc for him. I have interviewed Tommy Rees before. Me and Luke Smith did that a few years ago, but he's another one because we did that in 2021, and so much has happened since then. You know, he left Notre Dame to go to Alabama, works for Saban for a year, and then Saban retires, and he ends up with the Browns, and now he's the Browns offensive coordinator. He's also a great interview. So I think that's possible, by the way. I'd love to get Tommy Rees back on the pod. If we're going throwbacks, I mean, Joe Montana, right? He's one of the greatest football players ever. But I have to say, one of the most entertaining interviews I've ever done, and this is one that Luke Smith and I did back on Sons of Saturday when we were doing that several years ago. We interviewed Kavari Russell, and it was supposed to be like 30 minutes. It ended up going like an hour. Luke and I may have talked for 2 minutes in that hour. Kavari was just so funny, very long-winded, but hilarious. And man, he did not mince words at all about how he felt, but he talked about his story. He was very candid. Like, that's everything you want in an interview. So maybe I need to get Kavari back on the show, and maybe I just need more DBs, right? Because they like to talk a lot, and Kavari was awesome. So those are a few of the names that I've been thinking of, and I'd love to have any of those guys on the podcast. But that is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Thank you to everyone who sent in their questions, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for following along all week long. Notre Dame is going to wrap up spring practice tomorrow with the blue and gold game. As I said earlier, I'm going to have my reaction show from that game out this weekend. It's not going to be like super exciting of a game because so many guys are going to be out, but there's still going to be some important takeaways from that game, and I'm going to talk about them here on the show. So make sure that you are subscribed and that you rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and you like the video if you're watching along on YouTube. All that stuff goes a long way in supporting this show. But have a great weekend, enjoy the spring game, and I'll talk to you soon.